So last Sunday, I mentioned that there's some things that need urgent attention, and I'd like to use this opportunity to share a little more about that. I do believe that the purpose of this ministry was and is inspired by God, and that in order to enter into all that He has for us, we've got to evolve and we've got to be willing to make some changes. One of the key opportunities that I've seen here is that this base has a lack of solid leadership training and really no formal leader development program. We need to fix this starting now. And it's going to take time and resources and organizational energy, but it's critical for our corporate health.
Okay, so when we talk about these things, we really just we use them kind of as a case study to point to what we feel like are microcosms of a greater problem when it comes to the American church, when it comes to church in general, right? Mm-hmm. And, we have addressed some of the things that have taken place here that we've seen. And there's been a ton of stuff that we haven't addressed. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because we don't necessarily feel like it's on par or on course with where we're going and what we want to discuss here.
Right.
I think this is really important because it's something that we've spoken about on a previous podcast when, talking about Fix the System. If you haven't watched that video, go watch that video where we talked about how systems fail in churches, which causes a lot of the things that are actually happening. Mm-hmm. And in seeing this video, I think it confirms some things that are going on within that particular community. And I think maybe points to some greater challenges that they face as they move forward. Mm-hmm. And I have some thoughts on that I think would be relevant, for not only them, but I just think for church in general, right? As we think through leadership and qualities of leadership and systems that support leadership and people. And again, why we end up getting into these type situations as the American church.
Right.
That clear? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I don't want to be long-winded. So what are your thoughts on the video? Starting over.
All right. So my thoughts, I kind of felt like it's scary that a lot of these things were not already in place. I think that this is a foundation of all churches should already have this in place. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of just feel like, wow, but then on the other end, I'm glad that they are getting to this because they need to kind of reestablish, what IHOPKC is and what a leader should be, and kind of just let the church know these are what we look at and these are what the Bible says. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's just a weird public statement. And I know earlier when we talked about it, you used the same terminology. I think it is weird, Yeah, I think it's a weird statement for a couple of reasons. I'm not sure why at this point they decided to address this. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a part of the process that they're probably trying to figure out how to save or how to move forward in a very healthy way. Mm-hmm. So this is a normal part of that process, but
like kind of trying to break apart without really breaking apart. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're still IHOPKC, but we're under a new management.
Yeah, so like putting a sign up, under new management or something like that. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say this is kind of weird. It's just kind of out of place in terms of how it's being addressed. It seemed informal, but formal. Mm-hmm. Let me just say it. I think there's changes that are coming. Mm-hmm. This to me sounds like, and just being real, like in a corporate environment when you're level setting before changes come. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it sounds like, they're getting ready to make some leadership changes and some people are going to be angry over those leadership changes. So we're letting you know beforehand that these changes are coming. I also feel like maybe because he's not going to be there, you mentioned this, because he's not going to be there at some point. He's addressing this so that it's on record, that this is the way I feel about what's happening. I'm sure that there's a lot of turmoil, or there's a lot of discussions going on internally about how to move forward, some agreeing, some disagreeing, and how they should move forward. And I think, he's stating clearly what his thoughts are. He only has so much authority.
Right.
I think that's why I tried to make it clear that he's only here temporarily.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that the leadership team, after he leaves, is going to have to work these things out. So I think that I also felt like, to some degree, in some senses, there was a little bit of gaslighting and maybe blame shifting in there, with, this is not worked out on social media and different things of that sort. I mean, I understand what he's saying. These things should not be worked out on social media. They should be worked out within the context of the local community. However, because it was being ignored for such a long time, and these things were in secret, and nobody in the leadership was actually addressing them, is why people ended up going to social media in the first place to actually bring it out. So the what he's addressing is a response to what he's actually saying they need to clean up. So poor leadership is the reason why they're in this situation, and what caused people to go out to social media, because it wasn't being handled properly. But then you rebuke people for going to social media to talk about the things that are not handled in the church. But that's the reason why they went there, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So there still seems to be, in some senses, as they're trying to work this out, what part is the church's responsibility? What part is the responsibility of the people, and all of that type stuff?
Yeah.
But the reason why I thought this was super important to talk about is because he talked about qualities of a leader in a local church dynamic. Like, these are the qualities and qualifications of a leader. There was like maybe 4 or 5 things, just to kind of sum up the video, because we may have to do it a little bit differently. We probably can't play the video all the way through just because of copyright stuff. But just to sum it up, there were 4 things or 5 things or so that he mentioned. One, the leadership culture is sick, and it has been for a long time. The leadership culture is very toxic and sick, and it's been this way for a long time. They called people leaders who do not have the characteristics or the qualities of leaders. Right. So there are people in position that didn't have the characteristics or qualities of a leader. They call people leaders who aren't leaders. So there is a culture of saying, hey, this person is a leader. They were using that term very loosely, which is another thing that I felt was kind of weird. Right. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it's almost a stripping back of power from individuals. You know what I mean? Like, you're not a leader. You know what I mean? You're a facilitator. Right. But again, this is what happens when we move away from what the Bible calls leadership and start to adopt outside structures as a way of running a church. Because we add categories of leadership. Right. And so anyway, they made leaders who weren't equipped to be leaders. Right. So they made people leaders who weren't equipped to be leaders, meaning they didn't have leadership skills to be leaders, but they were called leaders. And this usually happens especially in places where gifting and talent is really important, that you ignore other aspects. The fact that they're gifted qualifies them as a leader. And that becomes a problem. And then they made people leaders who didn't have leadership fortitude or courage. That's kind of like what he was saying at the end, right? The courage to, make hard decisions, stand in tumultuous times. And so it sounds like, they have a leadership structure that has failed. It's now becoming even more apparent that the leadership structure and that they've had is not a proper leadership structure to support the ministry that they've had. And it's starting to show cracks all over the place. The foundation is cracking. And it's sad because, like you said earlier, this is something that should have been in place a long time ago. I mean, this is what the church should have been built upon. Right. It should have been founded upon. But I'll say this.
And I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I also think that this church was in place for how many years? Like since the 90s, I think they said?
Or, something like that.
And so you would think, just from us going to, being a part of other church leadership or other churches, over a certain amount of years, the church are always kind of, okay, let's kind of go back over what a leadership is. Like, I would feel like you kind of touch on that every other year or every 3 years or every 4 years, or you know what I mean? Just kind of retouch on what a leadership quality looks like,
Yeah.
and to go this long and not even have, this type of stuff addressed, that's weird.
Well, yeah, and I think that goes back to what a church is founded and built upon. To be honest, it just sounds like leadership wasn't a priority.
Yeah.
Biblical leadership wasn't a priority.
That's the word, yeah.
And I think that's what's happening now. This is what they're struggling with. They're struggling with. They seem to be struggling with the identity that they've built as a community, with prayer being at the center, gifts being at the center, and now they're trying to add leadership structure to that.
Right.
Right. I don't know how to put this, but this is probably going to be a horrible example. But they are trying to save the limb without amputating. You understand what I'm saying? They're trying to save it without cutting it completely off. Right. And so they're trying to heal the unhealthy parts. And this is a part of the process.
Yeah.
Right. They're evaluating how to move forward as a community and how to become healthy. The issue that they're running up against is really how deep does the sickness go, and how unhealthy is this, and can you actually do that? Can you actually save the limb? And so they're going to keep cutting back until they get to a place where I don't know if we can actually keep this. Right. But that's the problem with faulty culture. That's the problem when we build churches on foundations other than Jesus, when we build them on other than the Bible and Jesus, when we build them on things like gifts, when we build them on ideas or movements, the culture consumes that. The culture begins to function with that at its core, and it's hard to pull them off of anything else, right? And sometimes that thing needs to be blown up in order for that thing to actually become healthy, because there's no way. Culture eats vision all day long. It's just the reality. You can have good vision. He could set this vision out there, but if it's not reinforced in the culture, it's a problem. And then also remember this too. They can change the culture, but they also got to change how the people view and respond to culture. And they've been responding to culture in this way for a long time. I was reading some of the comments, and remind me, because I just want to say something about the people in the comments of that video. Why I think we need to be easy with some of those people. But it's clear that the people have adopted the unhealthy aspects of the culture that has been going on for a long time, because people in those comments, nothing he said was about Mike Bickle at all or anything, but people in the comments are saying, I miss Mike Bickle. We just want Mike Bickle back. We don't care what he did 26 years ago. He was talented. He blessed me. His teaching helped me. Right? So the culture has been to ignore or overlook certain aspects or certain things because of the high gifting status of individuals. So you could change the culture from a leadership perspective. But that doesn't mean that the people are going to follow that leadership change. You now have to disciple people into understanding what true community looks like and what true community is built around. And the truth of the matter is there's going to be a lot of rejection to that. Right? And so part of this is to try to make the culture healthy, to keep cutting back the sick parts until you can get to a place where you can be healthy. Unfortunately, sometimes that leads to having to amputate the whole limb because there's no way to save it. There's too much rot. There's too much going on inside of it. And that's a process, and they're walking through that process. But again, this is what happens when churches are built on foundations other than Jesus. And I'm not saying that Jesus was not worshiped there. I'm not saying that there wasn't good things that happened. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that it's clear that at the center of that ministry was personalities and people and gifts and different things of that sort. And it's caused a fault break in the foundation of that church, which has led to people being hurt by the leadership. And now they're trying to remedy that. You know what I mean? And so I just want to say one thing, unless, there's something else that you want to bring up here. But I do want to say one thing about the people who are in the comments. I was reading some of the comments on that video, and, you got a lot of people who are sticking up for Mike and a lot of people who are wanting Mike Bickle back and different things of that sort. And I think it's sad. Not that they have a relationship with this man or that they value him because he did work and people were helped by his work. And then I see some comments where people are just kind of, there will be people attacking that perspective of, Mike's this, Mike's that.
Right.
But the reality is people are grieving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People are grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And there are stages to grief.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Not everyone, but some people are grieving. There has been effect on people's lives as a result of this ministry.
It's causing a divide too, from what you're saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Between the congregation itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, people are grieving, and people are trying to get a hold of, the fact that they've been a part of this for so long, and that this man who appeared to be godly has some flaws that are deep.
Yeah.
And they're trying to reconcile that with what they've gotten, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to say this way, but because I've been in this position where when I saw someone that I held in really high regard, when I saw them kind of come off that throne in my own mind,
right,
it was like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? You go through a period of denial. You go through a period of anger. You go through a period of disillusionment. You go through a period of pain, depression, hurt. Like those are all signs of grieving, right? So we got to be easy with people too, and allow people to grieve this, because it's a process, right? It's a process that people are walking through. But nobody wants to feel like they've been deceived.
Right.
Okay. It's just the reality. Nobody wants to feel like they've been tricked, that they followed someone wholeheartedly and trusted themselves to the teaching of an individual only to find out that individual is not who they thought that individual was. Right. And so we got to be patient with that too, right? That's not everybody, but we have to be patient with that. We got to allow people to grieve. We could say things to them that may be true, but they're processing it. Yeah. Right. And so we got to be careful how we process it. But I just wanted to make sure I said that because in praying for those individuals and listening to some of those, it could sound like, man, they're taking up for this guy, even though these things have been proven to be true to some degree. He's admitted some truth to some of these things. Why would someone still, be there? Well, support. Or still support. Yeah. Well, some people, unfortunately, don't have a biblical perspective on what leaders and who leaders are and who's the true leader of the church. But there are also some people that are really genuine and really care and really were committed to that minister and that ministry, and they've been hurt by this. Definitely. They have been hurt. And one of the things that we're big on is church hurt. Like people are hurt by the church and they're wounded, and people are going to be affected deeply by this. So we got to be careful. Those individuals didn't cause the offense. Right. So we got to treat them that way. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but anyway, I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. Go check out our video on Fix the System. I think that's what it's called, or where we talk about why churches fall. It's usually in relation to the system that it's built upon. And part of that system is leadership. Oh, and by the way, let me say this last thing, because I did want to mention this. The qualifications that he mentioned were interesting also, because the Bible has qualifications already for a leader. Right. And there was nothing really biblically mentioned, even though some of those things might have been based on what Scripture says. I would have assumed that they would have just cracked open the Scripture and said, we need to build leadership on this. Yes. This is what biblical leadership looks like. And we are going to ensure that this is what we build our foundation of leadership on. Not programs, not curriculum, but the Bible. Right. And so again, that's because there seems to be a desire to want to maintain the system. You understand what I'm saying? Like we're trying to do this in a way without killing the system. Right. And unfortunately, if you continue to build on the foundation that's already weak, you're just going to build an even weaker foundation. The farther That's so bad. The more you build on that foundation, the farther the fall is going to be.
Yes,
right.
yes.
The deeper and the more people that are going to be hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I can't imagine what it is to be a part of that leadership community and trying to figure these things out. But there's no way, as he said, to make a hard decision except to make the hard decision and have the courage to make a hard decision. And that may mean that, listen, we need to really, really scale this thing back and to some degree restart on a firm foundation and build up from there. I'm gonna say this, people they're gonna have their feelings, but God can care less about our movements. I'm just being honest. He can care less.
Right.
God doesn't care about our movements.
Yeah.
He doesn't need us.
Yeah.
He chooses to allow us to be a part of his kingdom advancement, to be partners with him in his ministry of being image bearers within the world. He chooses to do those things. But God can do all of this by himself. He's not moved by our movements. We're moved by that.
Yeah.
Right? And so we got to look at faithfulness over fruitfulness.
Right.
We have to. We got to look at what it means to be faithful, and God will produce the fruit. But that's where we need to return to, is to be faithful to what God has called us to do. So that's it.
All right.